Welcome to the Naming of Aromatics podcast. This is part one of a two-part series. In this podcast, we're going to go over the basics of IUPAC naming for aromatics, and we're also going to talk about 4 different aromatics that have common names that are more widely used than their IUPAC names. All right, let's start with the definition. Aromatic compounds are a family of organic compounds. They're going to be named for their pleasant odors, so their aromas. They contain a cyclic structure that we call benzene. The formula for benzene is C6H6. That's not really something you need to memorize. Typically, especially when we're first learning these guys, we tend to draw them like this first structure, where you have alternating double bonds around a 6-carbon ring. This is a little bit misleading to draw it like this, however, because at any point, those double bonds could be in a different location. And the problem with this is that it suggests reactivity, that a double bond can be broken in one position and it winds up in another position. And it's really not reactive like that. In fact, benzenes are really stable. So a better way to draw a benzene ring is what we see on the right. This is how we are trying to shift over to drawing them. And what we do is we put that circle in the center. And when you have a circle in the center, rather than these double bonds, what that is suggesting is that your electrons are moving freely throughout that ring. And it's that movement of those electrons around the ring that's increasing the stability of your benzene. So it is actually very stable. Whereas if we show these as a double bond, it kind of reminds us of an alkene, and we know alkenes are very reactive. So this is the new way to draw your benzenes. Make sure you do essentially a cyclohexane with a ring in it to show the movement or the resonance of those electrons. But do know that sometimes you may see them drawn as these structures are to the left. They mean the same thing though. Let's start where we always start with naming. Let's start with the IUPAC naming. The parent name for this is benzene. It's always benzene. That is always your parent chain. If you have any branches coming off of your benzene ring, we identify those and we place them in front of the parent chain name, benzene. If you have 2 or more branches on the benzene, the ring has to be numbered. Again, you get to choose where you start with that numbering. All the former rules apply. So make sure that when you're naming those branches, you put them in alphabetical order. You use prefixes like di, tri, or tetra if you have more than one of the same branch, and you're giving them the lowest number of carbons possible. So let's put this into an example. We have a benzene ring, so I'm going to label the parent. I always like to write the parent chain first. This is a benzene. And coming off of the benzene ring is a chlorine. I don't have to number this because it is the only branch coming off the benzene ring, and we assume that it has position number 1. So I name this chlorobenzene, all one word. For our second example, we now have 2 chlorines. So when you have 2 chlorines, we have to mention the location of each of those. Again, our parent chain is benzene. And when I number this, no matter which direction I number, I'm going to have chlorines in a 1-2 position. So I need to make sure that I state the location of each of those, so 1, 2, and then I use the prefix di because chloro is very redundant, and we are not redundant. So your name is 1,2-dichlorobenzene. All right, let's do a couple practice problems so that you can get these in your notes. If you're feeling super confident, you think you got the hang of it, pause me, do the problems, check in with me. Let's see if we got them the same answers. All right, for this first one, I see an aromatic. I see a benzene ring, so I'm going to write benzene as being my parent chain, and then I'm going to deal with this alkyl group. This is an ethyl group, and I only have one group, so I don't have to number this. So the name of this molecule is ethylbenzene. For the second structure that's on here, again, I'm starting with benzene. Benzene is our parent chain. This time we have, with an E, this time we have 2 different groups, so I'm going to have to address both of those, and I'm going to have to number them. Both of these are 2 carbons apart, so I have to figure out, am I going to number 1, 2, or am I going to number 1, 2? And for this, I would default to, since no matter what you do, they're in a 1, 2 position on those carbons, I would default to giving the first alphabetical group priority. So in this case, we're actually going to follow the purple pattern of numbering. So we're going to start with bromine at carbon number 1, and it is first alphabetically, so it'll be first in our name. So this is 1 bromo, 2, and this has 1, 2, 3 carbons as an alkyl group branch. So this is propyl benzene, 1 bromo, 2 propyl benzene. All right, so for our aromatics, there's 4 aromatics I'm asking you to memorize along with their common names, because the common names are used more frequently than the IUPAC names are used. So you want to make sure that you're committing these to memory. All right, so if you ever see a benzene ring with a methyl group coming off of it, this is toluene. Our next structure is a benzene with an amino group coming off of it. If you see this, we would consider this to be our parent chain. I forgot to mention that over here. That's your parent chain, and we would call this one aniline. The next parent chain, if you see an OH coming off a benzene ring, we call this phenol. And we haven't learned this yet, but the OL is a nod to the fact that it has a hydroxyl group and it belongs to the alcohol family, and we'll learn more about that in subsequent chapters. And the final one that you need to have memorized, the common name, has 2 methyl groups in a 1,3 position. And we call this structure, the parent name is xylene. So these 4 you do have to commit to memory, make some flashcards and get them down, because they're going to come up a lot.